Hey guys, so I'm going to walk you through my process of color grading in DaVinci Resolve and make this as a tutorial slash vlog style for you casual viewers out there. Now, there's a lot of technical tutorials out there that are great to watch, as well as LUTs that you can download as quick fixes, but I wanted this video to show you how I approach color grading and what goes on behind the scenes. Now, as a disclaimer, I'm not a professional colorist, but I've been using DaVinci Resolve for a couple of years. Rather than giving you quick fixes, I want you to understand these concepts so that you can learn how to manually color a raw footage. So when I first started in video, I had no background in color, and I honestly just shot everything in a standard profile with the camera that I had at the time. I didn't know anything about preserving details and highlights and shadows using log, and I mostly just avoided having to use log and convert it into Rec 709. For those of you who don't know, Rec 709 is the color standard for high definition display, broadcast, and other media channels. So we're going to dive into DaVinci Resolve, and the first lesson that I will share with you is how to convert log footage into Rec 709, which is actually pretty easy. But to do that, let's go into DaVinci's color management to configure some of these settings with your display. Now, I use a MacBook Pro, but if you're using a Dell or PC or anything like that, then feel free to skip this step. So what you want to do is go to Preferences, General, then click on Use Mac Display Color Profile for viewers if you use a MacBook to edit. If you don't, then skip this step. Then you're going to go into File, Project Settings, Color Management, and here's where I'll explain about this module here. By default, you'll see DaVinci YRGB for our color science, which is how users can manually color their footage, so we're going to keep this as is. For timeline color space, in most cases, it's fine to keep it as Rec 709, but what I usually do is select DaVinci Wide Gamut / Intermediate for the timeline color space. Now, DaVinci Wide Gamut is a color space that's more flexible than Rec 709 when it comes to color grading and really pushing out those colors. Then I select Rec 709A as the output color space, which helps to mitigate issues on both Apple and non-Apple displays. These are basic settings that I like to keep in DaVinci Resolve, so now we're going to go in depth with the color tab. With this footage that I have in my timeline, I'm going to show you guys how to convert log into Rec 709 using an effect called Color Space Transform. Today, we'll be working with S-Log3 footage shot on the Sony a7S III and the FX3. You're going to add 2 serial nodes, which will be your start and end points of the Color Space Transform. Both of these will have the color space transform effect. The purpose of having 2 nodes is that the first one will convert S-Log3 into DaVinci Wide Gamut color space, and the second one will convert DaVinci Wide Gamut color space into Rec 709. Everything that you will adjust primarily will be within these 2 nodes here. As mentioned, the first node, we will input what was recorded with the camera, so S-Gamut 3 Cine is the input color space, and S-Log3 as the input gamma. For output color space, it will be DaVinci Wide Gamut, and output gamma will be DaVinci Intermediate. In the second node, now the input color space is DaVinci Wide Gamut, and the input gamma is DaVinci Intermediate. The output color space will be Rec 709, and the output gamma is Rec 709A. This is how you convert log footage into Rec 709. Alright, so we've done the conversion, now what's next? What I do is I add my primary nodes, which are 4 different nodes, each serving a different purpose: exposure, color balance, contrast, and saturation. These are primary nodes because they are correcting the footage before doing any stylistic coloring. The first step is correcting highlights and shadows. Now, in production, we don't always have accurate exposure levels, and we may not always have the best camera with the highest dynamic range. So in post-production, you always have to correct this mistake and properly adjust the exposure levels. So what I will do is I will go into the primaries color wheels and adjust the shadows if it's too dark and the highlights if it's too bright. You want to pay attention to the waveform on the right side of the screen to see which areas are clipping with highlights or crushing with shadows. You can play around with the offset, which is the brightness levels of the image overall, and lift, which is the dark parts, gamma the midtones, and gain, which are the bright parts. Next is color balance. Now sometimes our cameras may not accurately calibrate the temperature of the image, so it might look too warm or too cool. I can go over to the primaries color wheels again and select this eyedropper tool. Then click on a neutral color of the image to automatically balance it, but if it doesn't work, then I would manually balance it with the wheels. You can also check where your color balance is by using the vector scopes and making sure it doesn't skew too far to a specific color. Now this is my favorite node, and it is contrast. And the reason why it's my favorite is because you can really see a difference. What I like to do is go into the curves, click add default anchors, and play around with the points to create an S-curve. The key here is you don't want to go too extreme, just subtle enough to see a difference. For saturation, I hardly touch this, but if I feel like a clip needs more vibrancy, then I will add a tiny bit of saturation overall using a slider in this color wheels tab, or manually use this color slice tab to add more depth to each individual color itself. Now finally comes the fun part, and this is the stylistic look of the image. This is where you'll understand my style of color grading. Basically, I add this node after the second color space transform node because I don't want to mess around with the primaries, and you can think of it as an extension of the color corrected footage. Everything after the second CST node is the secondary grading. In this node, I will usually go into the color wheels and create what's called a split tone. Split toning is using the colors that contrast each other, such as orange and teal, magenta, green, and each sit on either the highlights or shadows respectively. I add a little hint of blue to my lifts and orange in the gain. I go off based on feel and whatever looks good. Then I'll choose a color in between as the gamma because that's the midtones, and you want to have the midtones be as neutral as possible. Sometimes I will isolate a color or enhance it using the curves, hue versus saturation tab because maybe a green is too bright or I want a different color of the sky. Now, if you really want to get meticulous about separating colors and the level of depth into it, then you can add parallel nodes, which will keep the layers separate. Finally, I'll add texture to the image, which is using film grain, so I select different film grain presets depending on what I like, or manually adjust the settings like grain strength and size. Sometimes I will add halation or glow to make the highlights look more like it's blooming and not beaming. This makes the image look less digital and more like a filmic look to it that you'll see often in cinema. So that's the behind the scenes on how I color grade. There's a lot more techniques to it, such as masking and skin tone, qualifying for skin tones, which I can create more videos later in the future about it, but this is basically the foundation of how I color grade most of my footage. If you enjoyed this video and want to learn more techniques from my channel, then please hit subscribe as well as like this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you for watching, and as always, take care.